This is the Made for Living Well podcast, hosted by Alexa Sherm, the place to create a life well lived.
Welcome back to the podcast. As always, my name's Alexa, and I am so grateful that you are here and that you've stuck around and that you really want to do things differently. And that's all we're about here at the Made for Living Well. We are in a series called Health School, where I teach you everything you didn't learn in traditional health class, if you even had health class, and also things that I didn't even learn as I studied undergraduate and part of my graduate program at larger universities. It's not to say that we had it all wrong, but it's to say that we didn't have this deep understanding of how the body works together. And it doesn't work alone, but in conjunction with your mind and soul. Now, in the last podcast, I shared that I too struggle with health, even though I am an expert in the field. And that might sound alarming and maybe even concerning, but I make the argument that I think most experts got into their field because they had a deep passion, whether they personally had a story revolving around the subject or they knew someone who did. Regardless, I think everyone at some point in their life really does struggle with health, and nutritionists are not void of those problems. As much as I had hoped that to be true, it isn't true. Now, of course, I'm going to let you go back and listen to that podcast and not spoil it here, but there were a lot of things that I had been struggling with this summer, and really, upon further investigation, I did recognize there was also a lot of good. Now, of course, the good doesn't always stand out, especially in times of struggle. Sometimes you have to go looking for it, but I'm so glad I did. And the reason that I'm glad I did was because I could go back to and start to pinpoint some of the things that helped me get out of that space. And really, that's the goal of health. Health may have been understood at this arrival at a place we thought we would forever be free of problems. It is a fantasy land and one that hopefully someday in eternity we will actually exist within. But here on earth, there is always going to be something, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean in life, something is always working to pull you out of balance. The key with health is not necessarily to fear this, but it's really to work with your body so that you can constantly regain balance. And that happens in your mind, body, and soul. It's a nourishment and a feeding and a supporting of your body so it has the tools and resources to thrive. And in the times when your health starts to waver, you can use these tools to help get yourself out of. Really, these are tools for living well, and I don't think enough of us talk about those tools. Instead, we tend to get lost in systems that we think will help us arrive. So if we shake that understanding and just start to recognize health is a series of actions we take that build resiliency inside of our body. And not just resiliency, but create balance. And as I mentioned in the previous podcast, and why we had to break this into two was because it was just getting too long. One of the things I attribute to moving myself out of that low place that I went through this summer and trust that even when I didn't externally see the changes, I know internally I was feeling them and experiencing them, was the healthy disciplines that I've established over the last few years. Now, you might be thinking the world does not need another podcast on discipline. And I would have agreed with that. However, I recognized that I was so fast to neglect the understanding of really what it meant to be disciplined because I had a false understanding of it. Or maybe better said, a preconceived idea of what discipline was. And I'm here to tell you that my idea and many people's idea of what discipline is actually really faulty. Coming into the health space, it's easy to look around and think that someone who wakes up and works out, needs a healthy breakfast, and lives that perfect life, well, they're just a disciplined person. Like, clearly they don't struggle with things. And I would have agreed with that years ago. Like, I would have just said, I'm just not disciplined. I don't have that in me, and therefore everything is so much harder for me. But the more that I've actually studied a discipline and really chosen to come to the understanding of what discipline meant or self-discipline has completely altered what I believed, taking it from something that I thought maybe was more like a character trait that was born in you, rather than understanding it as one of the greatest gifts that we have available to us. Now, I'm going to back this up and explain what I mean. Because again, a lot of times I think we look at discipline and relate it to willpower or like you have to have willpower in order to have self-discipline, which is not true. The two are very different. And in fact, it's not necessarily a chicken or an egg scenario. Really, discipline breeds willpower. We're going to talk about that briefly. However, I think the bigger issue with self-discipline is that we tend to align our beliefs about self-discipline with our moral failings. And honestly, I think this leads into more of the understanding that self-discipline must be a denial of self. And the problem with that picture is it lets shame and your moral failings and what you've believed about yourself, maybe even better said, your victim self, to really run the show. And in the long run, it just leads to greater dysfunction and oftentimes even self-destruction. Now, it's really easy to understand why we ended up here. A lot of our view of discipline overlaps into our view of self-discipline, which comes back to a form of punishment, of self-denial, of even shame. Like there's a lot of negative associations we have with discipline that have altered our perspective of it and perception of it that makes it really hard to live out. Because as long as we believe self-discipline is a form of self-denial, it will never work long term. And that's a result of how our brain and our body was designed, which really comes back to enjoyment. And arguably, I would even say a form of self-love or self-appreciation or just recognizing a better version of yourself. Because when we start to understand ourselves, we start to recognize our power of choice. And this, I believe, is one of the greatest gifts that we were given, arguably one of the ones that leads to the most self-destruction as well, but is that we understand and a better view of us that we do have the power to choose. It is up to us. Our life is not a product of the things that are happening around us, but what we choose to do with them. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuances in there, and there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with. It's not just cut and dry or easy. The idea of self-discipline can be really difficult for a lot of people, especially when they have the wrong view of themselves. And I think in the next podcast, we're going to have to talk about the view of self, especially from a Christian lens, because I think we have a really bad understanding of what self means and even the term humility. But for the subject of today's podcast and talking about disciplines that have really helped me, I need you to understand that self-discipline is not something that has ever come easy for me. It is not born in any of us, but it is really learned through a better understanding of ourselves and really our understanding of the power of choice and in some way self-acceptance, which proves that discipline is not necessarily a punishment, but it really is a gift that we can give ourselves, that have been given to us, that works to align our life with where we want to go. And it's not to dismiss where we've been, but to use where we've been to move ourselves forward in the path that we desire, the place we want to get to. And I think this is what's so powerful about disciplines. Because if we just go with the natural flow of life, it is rarely towards health and often towards more things like self-indulgence and even things like self-protection. And there's nothing wrong with a little self-indulgence and a little self-protection. It's pretty normal human behavior. However, we know that if we engage in self-indulgence or we do all of the things that we feel like doing immediately, we would not be in healthy places, right? Like if I ate everything I felt like eating, I can't even imagine, right? Like on some level, we have to recognize that not eating certain things is not because we're punishing ourselves or we're trying to beat ourselves into submission, but true discipline is an act of love and a desire for a greater good, for a greater purpose, for a greater place that we can exist within. It's not self-denial, but it's a form of acknowledgement, of awareness, of understanding. And through that, it should create a desire. It's really what sets that path forward and helps set the boundaries in your life. I like to look at disciplines as like the path forward. It's the path of setting boundaries in your life that you know if you stay roughly on this path, which can look like a million different things, but if you stay on it, it is going to get you to the destination or to the place that you want to arrive or to exist within. It's going to keep you in the land you want to live. Now, the thing about a path is that you can control the path, but we can't always control the weather or the environment of that path, which leads me to show you that there is great flexibility that is available and needed in the path of self-discipline. Discipline is literally setting a row of boundaries. It's drawing a line that leads you in the direction you want to move, and it keeps you there. It doesn't allow you to sway to the left or to the right, but it really does keep you on that path that leads to a better future. So it really is a gift. It's an act of love. And if you're a parent, you know that disciplining your kids is not a punishment, or it shouldn't be a punishment, but it's a way to help them and to grow them and to disciple them into a better human, into the person that you know that they were purposed for. Like disciplines are a gift, including self-discipline. Now, of course, it's hard to get here because we have a faulty view of self-discipline, which again leads back more into punishment, maybe perfection, really into allowing our shame and our guilt and our moral failings to guide the way. If you're doing that, it will always lead to a form of self-denial and dysfunction. And trust me, I totally understand that. I've been there before. And if you've put self-discipline in place and it hasn't worked, it's probably come from the wrong place. Which is why I talk about this before I get into my own disciplines that have really changed my relationship with my husband, my relationship with God, and even myself, is to show you that discipline, again, is not an act of punishment, but it's an act of protection in a lot of ways, and an act of opening up and helping you to step into a life more lived in purpose, which comes back to understanding that self-discipline is a desire. People don't just do things to do things. The people who stick with the things that they do them because they enjoy them, or they provide something for them. There is always a reason for our actions, which means self-discipline is really understanding the purpose in the choices that you make, really the purpose in the actions that you take. You see the greater good, you desire that greater good, and from that, you experience the good in the moment, even if it doesn't always feel good. Now, I might be talking in circles here, but what I'm trying to say is there's a purpose and a desire that comes from a right view of discipline, and it helps you to take action even when you don't necessarily feel like taking action, because you see the purpose in it and you see the greater good of it. You see the purpose and the pain. And here's the thing that I know about health, and I was thinking about this earlier because there's a lot of times that I don't necessarily want to do the things that I've become disciplined in. Like if I had the option to sleep in or wake up with my alarm, there's mornings when I would be like, I want to sleep in. My feelings currently are, I don't want to work. Like I don't want to push. Like I don't want to get into the pain. And again, it's easy to let our feelings run our life. In a lot of ways, they do. And it's not to diminish those feelings, but it's to remind you of a better feeling that could be experienced if you follow through with the disciplines that you've created. And so I can remind myself, like, yeah, it might feel good to sleep in, but it's going to feel better. I know I'll feel better if I get up and move my body and get into God's word and to really start my morning on a healthy, positive foot. Do I have to be perfect in that? No, because there's not guilt or shame if I do choose to sleep in. In some cases, that might be what is necessary in those moments, but disciplines are created over time through consistency, not perfection. And I think that there is a difference. It's not to say I have to do this every morning, but it's to say that most mornings, this is what I choose because I know in the end, I see the purpose in the pain of waking up to my alarm and getting up earlier, maybe when I don't feel ready, when it's dark outside, and engaging in a workout or moving my body. I mean, that doesn't always sound appealing. Like, I think we can all agree on that. But we can see beyond that to the purpose of those things. And again, when I was thinking about health, I was thinking that oftentimes health is so difficult because it's so different than your normal that it becomes hard. Because anything different is always going to be hard. It's always going to bring resistance, even if it's the best thing. And the only way that we can move beyond that is to see the purpose of the pain, of the resistance, of the hard things. And that's why often the best things in life come through allowing yourself to sit in the hard things because it teaches you how to move through them and see a better perspective of them. So health isn't going to be easy ever. But the discipline comes in to remind you of why you can walk forward and move forward in the pain of that process. And over time, it probably will become easier because it will become your pattern. And that's really the purpose of disciplines, is to help you reshape your life, to create those boundaries that allow you to move forward rather than just fall back in the natural tug of life, which is always into your old patterns, probably the ones that you've wanted to break forever, the ones that you don't always like and maybe even claim you hate. We will always move back there until we can create a safe place and find the desire and see the purpose and really even the passion and the pain of moving forward. We have to be rewarded in it, and that really comes from a choice. A choice of recognizing and really changing your perspective of what that reward looks like. Now, I'm rambling. We could do an entire podcast on discipline, and I'm going to talk more about it in my newsletter because I think it's a really powerful subject that we must understand. But with that being said, I've established like 5 pretty critical disciplines in my life, and out of them came a lot of different life rhythms. Again, because disciplines kind of set the boundary of the path, but within the path, there's a lot of flexibility and rhythms that can be established and even changed throughout different periods and seasons of life. And I have to say that these disciplines really did change so many things, including my relationship with my husband, myself, and God. And the reason I think that they changed them was simply because I started to recognize that I didn't have to live my life out of my shame or out of my pain or out of the past, but that disciplines were really a way of moving forward, an array of seeing, again, the purpose through doing hard things and establishing those hard things because they create a better life, a healthier foundation, new patterns. And when I could change that for myself, I started to experience and see everything else in a new way. Now, of course, I wasn't so confined to try to alter other people or alter my experience in life as to protect myself, which is what so many of us do, right? We work to control our life. But I was more concerned with how I wanted to show up in life. And how we show up in life really alters how we view it. It can change our perspective. So even if someone else hasn't changed, you can shift your perspective. You can change. And I think this becomes easier to relate to because instead of like living with this hard external shell, you're more open to understanding. You're more open to see, maybe better said, you're less polarized. which I think is like the most powerful thing with disciplines is that they help you to recognize or to live less concerned with life. And instead, you become more concerned with how you show up in life. And in the process of that, they become this boundary, this balancer that allows you to come back into your healthy state more easily because you know these actions fill you up. They nourish you. They kind of tether you to that healthy state. Like you can fall back on them when you start to feel really dysregulated or out of balance or even unhealthy. Here's the reality. Like we are going to get to places where we don't feel okay, where things aren't okay. The key is that we don't stay there. And how we don't stay there is tools that we implement and disciplines that are established that help us move forward, that help us get out of it. Now, I think disciplines are really created out of your values, and that becomes like a deeper subject, which I talk about why values are so important in a previous podcast that I'll link up, so you can go back and listen to that. But again, disciplines have to be something that you desire, that really align with your life and what you believe. And if you struggle with your beliefs, obviously it's a good time to go back and reevaluate that, to really dig into understanding what is it that I believe in, is it true? But again, the disciplines are often created from values. So I'm just going to share my 5 disciplines that have really helped shape my life and maybe a few rhythms that were established out of those disciplines or rhythms that are working well in this season of my life that fall within these disciplines. So the first one is adding more margin and present focus. And this has been a discipline that has not always come easy for me. I feel like I've always tried to think 10 steps ahead and live for that 5-year vision or that 5-year goals, and really just being goal-oriented in general. And I'm not saying goals are wrong, but I've really fought them hard in life. I think partly because I never really met my goals. And so it felt like this artificial belief that if I set a goal, I would automatically meet it. Like I could just think myself into believing that. But I never really had the action established because deep down, I didn't believe it. I didn't have the discipline to reach those goals because I was so concerned and consumed in the fear of not meeting them. And so goals just kept me so focused on the future that I missed what I needed to do now to get there. And you might be like, well, you're just not great at goal setting. Like that might be very true and why I don't have a love for goal setting. I think there's a time and a place for it, but I think we use it and overutilize it in so many scenarios where we really don't have that control. Like why I don't like people setting goals as it relates to their health, at least the outcomes of their health, because that is completely out of our control. You might be able to set goals about what you do to help your body, but that's really where I come back to. We just need to establish healthy disciplines, and those help our body because those create the action. Regardless of the outcome, we know that we're doing what is best and nourishing for our body. So adding margin and present focus has been huge for me because it hasn't come easily for me, but yet I see so much value in just living here in the moment. Because the only thing that I have choice over, the only thing that can be experienced is right now. In fact, this was kind of my focus this year, and a number of Bible verses that I felt like I have been praying over and really just trying to meditate on. So many reminders where God was like, stop worrying about tomorrow, like Matthew 6:34 that says, therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So my discipline of being in the present focus, of adding margin to my life, comes out in a lot of different actions, but a lot of them come to just living my morning routine, like not worrying about what tomorrow is going to bring, but just saying like, okay, today I'm going to do what's best. I'm going to move my body, not to look a certain way, but because it helps energize me. I'm going to just sit down and grow in the word. I'm going to pray over today. I'm going to be present with my kids today. I might be sad about how much time has already been lived, but I'm going to be most concerned with making memories in this moment. So again, it just comes back to how I live my life and really show up in life. The second one is I have really worked on spending more time creating and less time consuming and comparing. And this discipline might, again, not sound action-packed, but that does look like in my daily rhythms of I spend less time scrolling social media and looking at other people, and I spend more time. What can I do to create something new today? Like, how can I be more creative in my work? Even in these podcasts, like some of them I can research till the death's end, and then I get trapped into comparing about what I want to talk about versus what other people are saying, and it can feel all consuming rather than just trusting the process and trusting what I know and where I feel led. And so just spending more time creating on my own and less time comparing. But it also comes into spending more time just making healthy meals and cooking without overanalyzing and grocery shopping without overthinking. Like it really just, to me, comes back to I just want to be a creator and spend less time looking around for what we call inspiration, but often becomes a trap of comparison. The third discipline that I've been establishing is really hard for my Enneagram 2-ness is to be honest with myself and honest with other people, to have uncomfortable conversations, which is not necessarily hard for me because I love a sense of uncomfortableness. In a lot of ways, I feel like I kind of exist in uncomfortable places. I think those are the conversations that are most powerful and the ones that I love to have. But I'm not always honest with myself and able to have the uncomfortable conversations with myself or with the people in my life who I might be struggling with. So a daily rhythm for me is just being honest about how I feel and being able to voice that, because if I don't, it's often going to come out for me. It's going to come out in explosive anger. Like I'm going to be fine and I'm going to be fine until I'm not fine. And then I lose my mind and I can't even articulate why. Or if I'm feeling scared, it might come out in being angry at Peyton, my husband, for what he didn't do to make me feel safe, even though he didn't even know I was scared, or what makes me feel safe. So it's having those conversations with myself and with other people that allow me to vocalize when I'm feeling overwhelmed and stressed and when I feel like I'm taking on too much, or maybe when I'm feeling bored and I need an adventure. Instead of looking and going back to the unhealthy patterns that fulfill those desires, I'm really trying to break that pattern by being honest. And number 4 is the discipline of letting go. Again, these sound crazy. I understand that you're like, what are you talking about? Like, what about the discipline of walking? And what about the discipline of feeding my body well or getting adequate sleep? Yes, those are all lifestyle rhythms that I have established. Like those are all things that I long for and look forward to and see the desire in. But they happen and the desire comes not necessarily because I beat myself up for them or try to perfect them or set goals behind them. They happen because I've created space and margin, and I've learned to let go of comparison and be more honest with myself. And in the process, I just have more desire to do them. Like those are more rhythms rather than my disciplines. Yes, walking could be a discipline. Moving my body more, nourishing my body are all disciplines that I have established, but I look at them again more like rhythms. They might change from day to day, but I always go back to them because of these healthy rhythms. And the art of letting go literally helps me to create so much space in my life and more margin. And the fact that I have let go of doing things because I think that I will get something out of them. Like I don't necessarily need to work out now to look a certain way. I can work out because it makes me feel better, because it helps my body, because I know it's logically one of the best forms of longevity. I can nourish my body because I've let go of the process of trying to use food in a way to manipulate my body to look a certain way. Yes, we can want to change our body and change the way that we look. I'm not saying those things are wrong. I'm saying when they become the only thing that matters, we have fallen short of what it really means to live in purpose and to create a life well lived. And so the act of letting go comes out in a lot of different ways. It's recognizing the things that bother me, that weigh me down, the areas I feel like I really need to fix or to try to self-protect. And I can just go back and say like, okay, I can let this go. Like I can let go of the thing that I felt like was wrong. I don't need to stew about it. I can let go of the fact that I might have had a bad day or that I didn't follow through with my healthy disciplines. I can let go. And in the process of letting go, I create space to live more, to fill myself up, which is really what it means to live healthy, is it creating space to fill yourself with the nourishment your body needs to thrive. So most of my healthy rhythms, like walking more and nourishing my body and filling my mind and my soul with nutrient-dense foods and words and experiences, comes back from the act of learning how to let go. Because letting go creates the space for me to engage with those things and letting go of what I think the outcome should be. Now, of course, if you listen to the last podcast, you know I struggled greatly with this. But again, coming back to this discipline of like being able to let go of some of those expectations was what helped pull me out of that and move me forward. And then the last thing that I really am working on is having a holy confidence, which arguably maybe is not a discipline, but more of a way of life. But I think a lot of disciplines are. But what I mean by having a holy confidence is having a better view of myself and also what is in my control and what isn't in my control, which helps me to let go. I think having a holy confidence is what overshadows all of it, what sums it all up to allow me to do all of the other disciplines in my life. And this is one that shaped my view of myself and my relationship with my husband and God more than ever. And I'm going to do an entire podcast on this because I think a lot of times we talk about self-confidence, which creates an artificial view of confidence that's really not necessarily confident at all because it neglects our full dependency and our interdependence on all of life. It makes us our own hero, which makes us believe that we can fix ourselves, which is a terrible place to be because that's not really our reality. Our life is not about fixing ourselves. It's about filling ourselves and surrendering to the one who can fix us and who ultimately will fix us. But again, this is a podcast for another day. I am already going over, but I just need you to understand that these disciplines are things that are desirable, things I look forward to, not necessarily always in the moment, but consistently over time, I see a purpose in them. And because of that, it guides my life and leads to healthy rhythms and lifestyle actions that really have changed my life. So I am completely a fan of having lifestyle disciplines. I think they make a world of difference. And they might be uber practical to start with, like having a discipline of moving your body or nourishing your body. And they might get expanded to be more like these disciplines that I've set that maybe don't feel like specific action, like goal-oriented action. But these are the disciplines that have set the boundaries of where I want to live. And ultimately, I hope that you see that self-discipline is a gift. It accentuates your purpose and yourself and life here on earth. And it helps you to live more fully and abundantly and more confidently because you exist within a better version of yourself. Now, with that said, again, I'm going to get deeper into the topics of self and holy confidence and some of these other topics because I recognize how important they really are. So stay tuned as we dive into those. But for now, make sure you head to thelivingwell.com and check out the blog post for today's show where we dive deeper into disciplines and where I share more of my daily life rhythms and how these disciplines react or become those lifestyle patterns that I live within over at The Living Well. For now, I thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so honored that you're here and that you follow along. And I would love it if you share this with your friends and family. I was recently notified that I'm one of the top 0.5% podcasts in all of the world, which is mind-boggling. And I owe that all to you. So thank you for being here. Don't forget to share it with your friends and family. It is literally the best way to spread the word and help other people join this journey of doing health differently. Okay, I love you, friends, and I will see you back here in the next podcast.